Hey, June, appreciate you making the time today. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I think your post that you made on LinkedIn maybe a month or so ago, made the rounds. I probably got that post from our CEO. I got that post from our head of B2B. Probably got like 3 4 people separately sending me that post without any connection. So I think you struck some gold there. And it was pretty dope. Like it built a really energized conversation internally, and kind of a moment for us to kind of take a step back. Are we kind of all thinking about this the right way? So thank you for that moment, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to kind of just start off with an introduction and background on kind of yourself, and then maybe you kind of help us understand kind of what sparked that post, and then we kind of just start from there.
Yeah. No, appreciate the kind words. June Choi, Senior Vice President of Xnurta. Um, I started my career at Amazon. So I was actually at Amazon when sponsored ads launched. So I've seen the entire evolution of sponsored ads and the overall retail media space, which has been really cool to see. I actually got out of the retail media space, so I jumped into more of the AI space, more like AI infrastructure, ML infrastructure, part of the industry, and then ended up here at Xnurta because I actually knew Kashif, who joined here as the CEO in January of last year. So it's been a fun ride, and I think what prompted the AMC post is, I think it was probably about like 9 months back where AMC really started to kind of take off. I would say kind of take off. And I just, from what I saw when I was at Amazon and I saw kind of the adoption of sponsored ads, and AMC was everything that my clients would ask me for, literally everything. And so, with that background in mind, I was like, okay, well, if Amazon is now launching this data, everyone's going to care, everyone's going to adopt it. It's just a matter of time. So I dove as deep as possible into AMC. I try to learn as much as possible. I'm fortunate enough to work in a place where AMC, from a product standpoint, is highly prioritized. And so that was just a really, that post was just like a facet of what I was thinking about, how I think about AMC, how I think about brands, advertisers, agencies that should be using AMC and how they should be adopting it. So that's what kind of spurred that post.
Very, very cool. Yeah, it sounds like you're making all the right bets from a career perspective. So congrats on that. Um, yeah, I think that was kind of one of the first things that started the conversation internally as well. And the first questions that kind of come up, and you've probably heard this. I hear this kind of all the time from my seat is incrementality, right? Like, how do you understand your advertising dollars are actually making an impact? How you're not cannibalizing yourself. So it's kind of and then instilling trust, right, in the dollars we're spending and kind of the thought that goes behind it and the data that goes behind it. So maybe we kind of just start there of like, how are you leveraging AMC to answer some of those questions or any other kind of data sources that you're leveraging to answer those questions to build confidence in kind of the work that's being done.
Yeah, I think that's always an age-old question, is incrementality. Everybody wants it. I don't think anybody's perfected how to actually calculate it.
Totally.
And so that's where I think, from an incrementality standpoint, I mean, the first couple of questions is like, what do you define as incrementality? Is always the question that I ask. Is incrementality is so different for everybody else. Sure, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, did these sales generate where they wouldn't have happened in the past if you did X, right? And so I think overall incrementality, I never say, like, from a company standpoint or even just a personal standpoint, is like, if somebody asks me to calculate incrementality, I say, like, look, we're not there yet. I think AMC is going to be the closest thing to get us there. And I think a lot of what I see around AMC, and the closest thing is obviously those new to brand metrics that people are starting to care more and more about, and just unique ways that I've seen people use AMC to almost back into, I would say, quote unquote, incrementality. But I think overall with incrementality, I always say, like, look, like, we're probably not there yet. And as much as people can say that there's iROAS or things of that nature, I'd
Totally.
much rather go the route of truly defined metrics, like new to brand metrics. And new to brand metrics also don't apply to everybody, right? They only apply to folks that have, I would say, more of a condensed, shorter, more frequent purchase pattern than, like, let's say, TVs. You're not buying TVs every single year. And so I think from an incrementality standpoint, it's really breaking down what people mean about what people are thinking about in terms of incrementality. And then let's say leveraging AMC and being able to do all the analysis to be able to get close to incrementality, like new to brand. But I would rather be transparent than not. And when people ask me if we can calculate incrementality, I always say like, look, we're probably not there yet. We're getting there, but let's think about how you define incrementality and get you as close as possible with AMC.
No, I think that was spot on, right? Like, I think everyone's looking for a silver bullet, and I
Yeah,
think people are looking for a binary yes no. And our perspective and kind of some the way that we think about it is largely it's on a spectrum.
yeah,
And you yourself as a company need to define what that means for you. And I think the tools and the logic and sophistication is probably there, but you as a company need to kind of have a proactive point of view on what that looks like and then
yeah,
build decisions off of that. So totally agree
yeah.
with that.
Here's what I would say, like maybe even pivoting a little bit there. I think like with AMC, the people that are going to be the most successful are the people that are the most creative, because AMC is effectively like a blank canvas, right? Like you can pull whatever data that you want. All of this data is now available at your fingertips. Now, the smartest people and the most creative people are going to be thinking about ways of using AMC that maybe 90%, 95% of folks aren't. And so there's this competitive advantage where the data is there. Now it's just around what are the queries, what are like who are the most creative people that are thinking about this in unique and interesting ways that a lot of folks are kind of catching on. So that's where I think AMC is going to be super powerful. Is to your point, the data is there now. It's just kind of putting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of that analogy with AI, right? Or at least generative AI. Like the best folks are going to be the prompt engineers, the thing that you
Yeah,
ask, right? You're kind of an AI tool. I think the same logic applies for AMC. You've got to have a point of view, and then you get real value out of that.
yeah,
And then kind of going back to the basics, right? I think one of the first things that you highlighted in your post is like you've got to pick an objective, right? And you've got to
mhm,
pick a starting point. Any advice or any kind of things that you've seen where people have done that well? And I think sometimes it comes off as a basic answer, but if you ask like
yeah,
three people what you're trying to accomplish, one's going to say, hey, I want more revenue, someone's going to say I want more profit, someone's going to say I want more new brand sales. It's like, how do you
yeah.
kind of think about that foundational question to start with, and then would you create multiple objectives? So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I wrote about this in my post and actually did a post on this today where I think it's a great example. Like a lot of the times when we talk about AMC and when I talk about with AMC with folks, the objective isn't necessarily like, hey, I want to grow my top line. It's like, I want to make sure I'm being the most efficient I can with every single dollar that I spend. And am I doing that in the right way? And so that effectively comes back to like, hey, ACOS or ROAS, right? And I think overall, there was a really good example of, let's say you're a CPG company and you're a CPG company and your overall metric that you're focused on is ROAS because that's what you've been focused on as a brand for the last 10 years. I actually think that's an outdated metric because AMC now gives you the opportunity to look at metrics like lifetime value ROAS, where ROAS is not calculating repurchase rates. So ROAS could effectively say this campaign is underperforming because it's not taking into account a CPG or a consumable product that's bought in high frequency and that's bought every single month after that first purchase, if it's a really good product. But lifetime value ROAS does. And
Totally.
so if you start leveraging AMC to utilize and look at data in a different way outside of what just ROAS is, and you start piecing away lifetime value ROAS, okay, this initial ROAS was X, but actually the lifetime value ROAS and the total sales that this campaign generated was actually higher than all these other campaigns that are higher ROAS, because now you're starting to peel back the layers and actually get much more granular insights. And I will also add on the other really interesting aspect of that is the lifetime value ROAS also allows you to be able to understand when people are coming back to purchase. So if you're buying a product in the first month, when does that customer come back? Is it the second month? Is it the third month? Is it the fourth month? And then you can actually leverage AMC custom audiences and build those targeting segments because let's say, for instance, 30% of customers that bought in the first month come back in the third month and repurchase. So now what should you do? You create an AMC custom audience, you retarget folks in that third month that purchase in the first month to maximize the efficiency of your ads. So that's where I think you really start to peel back what AMC is able to generate, where I also highlighted this in my post, where I think the biggest thing around AMC is not like, hey, is the data there? It's how to use the data. And I think that's what a lot of the industry right now, I don't want to say is struggling with, but people are still trying to piece together is not just how to use the data, but to also leverage the data to build effectively a query library that you can scale, automate, and repeat. And so I think there are just some clear indicators where you think about those use cases like that, where they're very scalable, easily automatable, and those reporting and insights actually generate a much more efficient way of looking at your ads versus what it was like before.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of nailed it, right? Where a lot of us and a lot of people in general are just kind of looking at what exactly happened in that day versus if you're a brand that's looking to build a brand, looking to build lifetime value, right? Looking at new metrics like lifetime value of your ROAS and then making
Yeah.
decisions off of that is probably going to change the game in terms of how you measure the efficacy of the dollars that you're spending.
Yeah.
I think you hit on a lot of good points, and that was kind of some of my questions here. Like, you know, how do you? There's all the data in the world. How do you kind of turn audience behaviors into kind of tactical campaign strategies, and then do that in a way that's repeatable, scalable, and turn that into a system, right? Like, what are the tools? What are the reports? Have you seen anyone kind of do that really, really well? Um,
Yeah, I think the biggest gap, obviously, that everybody knows about with AMC is that there is a technical barrier. Now, Amazon is doing a lot to reduce that technical barrier, make it no code. But to really, I would say, dig deep into the data to really optimize and leverage AMC, if you don't have, let's say, a no code tool like our platform or any the other platforms that are out there, it becomes difficult because I don't think I've met there are some marketers out there, but the majority of marketers don't know how to write SQL.
totally.
And it's not just SQL, it's Amazon's version of SQL. So there's like a 10% variance within the actual SQL. So I think there is that gap of like the people that need the data and want to use the data the most don't have access to the data in the way that they want it. And so I think the step one is actually leverage tools that enable you to dig deeper into the data versus just like the Amazon native console where it's getting better and better. But I think there are tools out there that allows you to dig really deep into the data. So that's step one is enable your marketers, enable your team to have the right foundational aspects in place to actually pull those reports and insights in a more comprehensive way. And then after that, I think you have to really be very granular and very specific around those specific use cases. And I think it's difficult for an organization that doesn't necessarily have the experience around AMC or isn't talking about it every day to spend a full day, 2 days, 3 days just to learn about AMC. I think that's where you rely on your partners. You rely on people that have done this, that are already doing this in the right way. And I think there's tons of examples, right? Like once you have the foundational aspects in place of being able to access the data, and then once you understand fundamental use cases, like baseline use cases that everybody should be doing, where there's no reason you shouldn't be doing as an advertiser with AMC is like, I talked about the LTV if you're a CPG brand. There's another one where we call it the cross product association model, but effectively, if you're a brand, it tells you exactly what a customer is doing once they hit a hero ASIN. So if they go to a hero ASIN, what other products do they buy together in one order? What other ASINs do they buy that's more expensive than the hero ASIN? So it'll literally inform your upsell strategy or your bundling strategies. And I'll give you a great example. There was a brand that leveraged that analysis, that model. Basically, they wanted to increase their basket sizes, average order value for Prime Day, right? The 2 days of Prime Day for them were worth a month's worth of revenue.
Yeah.
And so the top line, the bottom line impact, it was material if they could impact those 2 days. And I believe the anecdotal was like they wanted to try and increase their basket sizes by roughly 15% was an aggressive goal for those 2 days of Prime Day. They took that AMC analysis, they identified exactly what products were being bought together that they didn't know in the past. And they saw all these different associations with those kind of key hero ASINs. They bundled it together, and I think they roughly hit, I think they were actually close to their goal of 15%. But that 15% in those 2 days of Prime Day drove a very, very material impact to their business. And so I think that's the ways that people, once you start understanding like key use cases, very specific use cases that are actually very low lift, that are actually very informative, that's where once people start to see those results and they have that foundational layer of accessing that data, it just becomes more of a test and learn at that point. Once you get into it, it's almost hard to stop digging deeper.
No, I think that that's a brilliant, brilliant example. I think we kind of sit in a unique seat where we see a bunch of brands, we see different products, right? And I think that's one of the insights that we typically glean through AMC. One example of that is, hey, we've got a kind of a power, snow charger, snow blower, right?
Yeah,
And typically, if you buy a powered something, you're going to have to buy a battery with it or certain types of batteries with it. Seeing those two things, combine those together, and then build a package off of that. And then you can kind of do that in a bunch of different ways. So no, that's super
yeah,
super critical and insightful.
yeah,
And kind of just going down that path, I think you hit on something super interesting, and things that I kind of think about as well. It's like, what is the makeup of a marketing team today, right, versus tomorrow versus what it was 5 years ago, or like what are the skill sets you need to leverage all of this data, to leverage all the tools, to build the insights, to then go action on it. How do you kind of see a marketing team and the makeup of a marketing team evolving over time?
yeah. That's a great question, and I actually think it's funny enough. We still do these dinners where we invite a bunch of e-commerce leaders. We get 30 e-commerce leaders in a room. It's a private dinner, and we talk about all these things. And one of the biggest shifts to the marketing teams that I've seen literally in this past year, where we started talking about AMC to even now, is that there is more of a focus on a data analytics person, like literally somebody that's a little bit more technical than somebody that they would have previously had. And they call it, typically we've heard the roles is like analytics, like an analytics manager that's focused on AMC, and focused on generating the most data as possible and extracting this data. And so I think the traditional ways of people looking at marketing, and everybody knows kind of the overall marketing structure, the way that's changing that we've seen. And I'll say this is more so for mid-market and enterprise brands. For the folks, the e-commerce leaders that we've spoken with, they're saying that they're starting to build up kind of internal, not innovation centers, but more so analytic centers within their teams to be able to access and leverage this data because of how important it is. And this is the commonality and the parallels here is a year ago, people were asking us, what is AMC? 6 months ago, they were asking, okay, what are the basic levers of AMC that we should be doing? Now, I think every single person has AMC in their media plans. Like that's how fast AMC has evolved.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think these analytics teams, these mid-market enterprise teams, they realize how valuable it is. And so they're actually starting to build a little bit more analytical, data-focused folks within their internal teams to be able to leverage this data as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. I think that's kind of the approach that we try to take here, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you want to be a data driven company, you need some type of data engineering, some type of data analyst, right, to even access the information.
yeah,
Then the makeup of that team over time will absolutely change. That's always a double edged sword, but I think it's kind of where the puck is going.
yeah.
And to some of those points, right? Kind of mentioned middle market, and you mentioned enterprise CPGs. Like, how do you think about leveraging AMC, leveraging kind of all the tools that we have? How does it differ if you're a brand, a single brand, if you're a company that owns maybe 5 to 10 brands, or a
Yeah.
company like us that owns hundreds or works with hundreds of brands? There's a bunch of different use cases. So yeah, be curious to kind of get your thoughts there.
So I think AMC has effectively bridged a little bit of that gap between, let's say, a smaller brand, or even like a smaller agency versus a larger agency, because historically in the past, those enterprise brands would be the only ones that have access to this data.
Yeah.
right? And so these are the brands that had access to the most data. These are the brands that had the resources to pull this data. And these are the brands that were able to action on this data to be more efficient, right? Exactly to your point, the brands that are the most data driven are the ones that are going to win. I think what AMC has done that's pretty unique is it's bridged the gap. So we have a lot of, I think I've seen a lot of folks that aren't the P&Gs of the world, but their whole business is focused on Amazon, right? Their whole business is focused on Amazon. Their revenue comes from Amazon. Their livelihood comes from Amazon, where they now have access to the same level of data as P&G with the tools that are available, right? With the tools that are available to be able to automate, not having to code and be able to pull this data. And so it's bridged the gap of how people are able to leverage this data in a more intelligent way. And actually, funny enough, some of the most creative ideas actually come from these brands. They don't
Or
necessarily come from these larger corporations. They come from folks that are just like, okay, this is my livelihood. I need to figure out how to be the most efficient. So every single day, I need to literally learn about AMC, talk about AMC, figure out how to use your tool or any other tools out there to be able to create these use cases. And I think that's where this gap is starting to close a little bit more and more. And then now people are starting to understand that, hey, I can be much more efficient with my ads if I'm just much more smarter with how I leverage AMC than everybody else. So I call it speed to insight, but I'm sure everybody calls it that. But basically, the speed to insight and the speed to optimization, that gap is closing just because of the fact that AMC is available to everyone.
yeah, I I've experienced it, right? Like the mom
Yeah,
and pop folks that are running these Amazon brands are so smart, so ahead of the game, kind of know everything from the operational perspective to FBA to supply chain, marketing, stitching all that together.
yeah.
You can learn a lot from those folks, and we definitely have in kind of in the past.
I'll,
Um,
t- I'll t- oh, go ahead.
no, go for it.
I was going to say, I'll tell you a great example of this. We had a workshop that we did around AMC. We called it an AMC masterclass. And we were going through all these use cases that were just like, hey, these are the key use cases. This is how we think about using AMC. And there was a brand that wasn't like an enterprise brand. There was a brand and the owner of a brand that raised their hand and they were just like, oh, this is really interesting. What about, so basically now with AMC and custom audiences and then being able to layer that on with sponsored ads, you could effectively geo target for sponsored ads. And we're just like,
Hmm.
we waited a second, we're like, yeah, you actually can now effectively geo target for sponsored ads because now you can leverage AMC custom audiences, target only folks that have seen a DSP ad, and then leverage that onto a sponsored ads and use a bid modifier.
Yeah.
And this idea came from that person in that masterclass who's, like I said, not a major brand, but he's just more creative. And that I think use case is now being talked about by a large variety of people. But that was like a perfect instance of somebody where not a major brand, somebody that's actively thinking about AMC every day, and then just the wheel started turning and he brought up that use case.
That's brilliant, man. Yeah, we're going to learn so much more about kind of just the growth hackers once they get their hands on some
Yeah,
of these things,
exactly.
and then
Exactly.
become the norm as it usually does.
Yeah.
Um, very very cool. Kind of before we kind of segue into just a deeper dive into kind of the AI and where we are, what I want to kind of lastly touch on is I think we learn about we learn a lot about things when we win, but I think we learn a lot more when we lose.
Yeah.
Where have you kind of seen brands kind of stumble, or what are the kind of the obvious mistakes to kind of avoid? If you're early to this and you're looking to ramp up and you want to invest your time and effort into it, what are some landmines to kind of avoid?
Yeah, I think the people that try to do everything with AMC, and we've constantly seen this, they come on, they have this incredible expectation that AMC is going to solve every single one of their problems. It's going to be able to calculate incrementality. It's going to
Right.
be able to do everything. And so they try to do everything with AMC, and they effectively do nothing. And I think a large part of where I've seen just people kind of struggle with sometimes is they have access to a lot of these reports and they don't know how to pull actionable insights from these reports. And so they get really excited about AMC and then they go and pull a path to conversion report and then they're just like, okay, now what? Right. And they've invested all this time, resources to be able to pull all these reporting insights around multi-touch attribution and all these other things, but then they never figure out the now what. Like, how is this impacting the performance of my campaigns, which is ultimately what everybody cares about. And so I think the broader aspect here is just like, for folks that are getting into AMC or dipping their toes into AMC, I would say start with that objective. Like, you don't need to like do everything at once. Start with that one defined objective for one defined specific report or one defined pain point, and then work backwards from there. Because you'd be very surprised at how many folks that just start with one idea and that idea becomes 10 different ideas because now they're actively testing and learning. And I'll say, even to take a step back even further, I'll just say actively, the people that aren't leveraging AMC right now, which I still think there are a good amount of folks that they don't even have an instance. Like, that is probably the biggest mistake, to be honest, at this point in time. So those are some of the key things. I mean, especially if you get more and more tactical, there are folks that I think they use AMC as basically this lever of like, hey, DSP is going to be magic because now we have these AMC custom audiences. So I think a lot of it is just around like being smart, being tactical, and understanding it's a step-by-step process without trying to boil the ocean.
Yeah, I think couldn't agree more. This is kind of something that I say out loud to myself and everyone when we're trying to tackle new things and big things as one, just dip your toe in. But slow is smooth, smooth is fast. If you just
Yeah.
get comfortable with it early on, you'll be able to fly, very, very quickly. So have some focus when you get started is a very good kind of thought to lead with.
I'm curious. I mean, you guys deal with a ton of brands. So what have you guys seen from that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that becomes a challenge for us, and I'll give you one kind of unique probably challenge that someone like us has is if you're running hundreds of brands and you've got one
Yeah.
or two kind of ad accounts, even knowing where the sales are being driven based off of Amazon's kind of attribution halo is a challenge, right? If you've
Yeah.
got thousands and thousands of products in your ad account, are you really driving traffic to this product, and is it driving that conversion? So that's one kind of critical foundational way that we leverage AMC is just to do kind of same product, same SKU, clean attribution across the board, which then gives us all the foundation we need to build our decisions off of. That's an obvious one. We've been fairly ahead on kind of the AMC world and
Yeah.
kind of reporting side. I would say path to purchase has been kind of something that we've leaned on for quite some time.
Yeah.
We're a big kind of we also have this agency called Buy Box Experts, and then we also leverage it on this retail side, right? So when we're kind of having conversation about full funnel tactics, right, how you're leveraging your bottom of the funnel, another example is, hey, your branded searches are going down, right? I think that's where a very good example of leveraging AMC insights, what is going on, understanding kind of the drivers of that, and then leveraging DSP to make sure you're using the middle of the funnel to kind of turn that trajectory back around to go generate your organic sales. I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen that, many, many times over of how you can leverage your full funnel, leverage AMC insights, know exactly what's going on from a brand's perspective, and then be able to invest your dollars in the right part of the funnel to turn that story around. So those are kind of two obvious ones that we've been leveraging for quite some time.
Yeah, that's where I get really excited is I think we've talked about this full funnel approach for a long time, just as an industry in general is, hey, we need upper funnel to tie to lower funnel, and we need to make sure everything's in sync. And I actually the launch of AMC, I think that it is actually possible now, where maybe in the past it was all theoretical. Because now it's like, okay, we know what keywords work. We know what keywords convert. We know what keywords even drive the most new to brand purchases. And now you can leverage AMC custom audiences and retarget based upon those specific keywords without having to be reactive. Because sponsored ads is it's fantastic. It's so efficient, but it's so reactive.
Right.
DSP is proactive. It'll go out and find those customers for you. So now I almost look at it as like you're combining the best of both worlds. So you're combining sponsored ads targeting with DSP proactiveness and outreach. And so you start to tie some of those lower funnel tactics with those upper funnel tactics. And that's where I think AMC, it does connect the dots.
Yeah. And it's effective. Right? We've seen
Yeah.
it kind of turn
Yeah.
things around. You probably have to. It's not immediate like search, right? You're not going to find out in a week or so. But if you're paying attention over a month, 3 month, 6 month kind of time horizon, you'll clearly see the impact. And then it gives you even more confidence to go invest in the middle of the funnel and potentially the top of the funnel as well.
Exactly.
Um, so AI is obviously a heavily covered topic, but
Yeah.
interestingly enough, at least from my perspective, we're like super, super early in the game when it comes to, at least leveraging AI and adopting it and being part of all the things that we do. What's your perspective on that? Like relative to kind of the trajectory of the internet, right? Are we in kind of the 1996 era? Are we beyond that? What are you kind of seeing in terms of who's pushing the envelope? How is it being adopted? Um, and then kind of trajectory.
I think um, I think we're in the stages where we're probably a little bit past the 1990s, maybe like roughly the 2000s, late 2000s, where people are now starting to find like actionable, identifiable use case that actually make an impact. Now, I will caveat that by saying those two, like us being in 2000s, 2010s, will greatly ramp up with how fast AI is moving.
Yep.
Like in the last 2 to 3 years, and I'm sure you've picked up on this, everybody else has picked up on this. OpenAI, Chat GPT, all of these new open source models, these large language models that are coming out. It's just been an exponential curve, and everybody knew that was the case, but I don't think anybody realized like 3 years ago how fast this space was going to move.
Yep.
And so that's where I actually get really excited because um, the focus around I think the advertising space is that I actually think AI is probably one of the best, or excuse me, the advertising space is one of the best use cases for AI, and specifically kind of retail media, where we think about it as like these high velocity, highly manual tasks that machines are actually better at doing than human beings, which is, does this bid work or does it not work?
Yeah.
Right? Is this budget right or is it not right? And it's scouring the internet, uh, all these different pages, and it's taking a look at all the comprehensive aspects of what's happening on Amazon and feeding that back, and it's making these adjustments where us as human beings just physically we can't do that. And we have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to take. So it's like that's where I actually think AI. I get really excited about AI is because I think the space that we're in, it's actually a fantastic use case. And I'll take it even a step further. With how fast this is already moving, I think the agentic AI or AI agents for this space is going to be a game changer.
Well,
That is something that we as a company and as an organization, we are actively pushing because I go back to that geo targeting example that I gave with AMC custom audiences. But literally imagine a world where now, as your AI evolves, let's say there's a major storm or a winter snowstorm that's coming in 2 weeks, and the AI agent is plugged into the API and is able to understand that that's coming down, or maybe it's even like 2 hours away, and there's for some reason there's a major storm.
yeah.
The AI agent will know that, and then it could automatically adjust your bids, your ad campaign strategy to automatically adjust for what just happened. And that's where I think this space is going to evolve so quickly. And like those are the use cases where I think about it, I'm just like, okay, if this starts happening, then this is a game changer for everyone in this entire industry.
Yeah. No, our industry is just prime for all the
Yeah.
different kind of ways that we can leverage AI. I think we've probably used machine learning, right, to kind of build all the algorithms when it comes to advertising. The next phase was generative AI, where you're coming up with content, keywords, videos, right? That's kind of all generated, and totally agree. The next phase of that is an AI agent that's going to put all these things together and to be able
Yeah.
to almost operate a business potentially with a handful of AIs. We'll kind of see how that all plays out. But that is the interesting part about exponential growth, right? Like every next fold is such a leap that you
Yeah.
kind of see like it's gradually, then it's suddenly, and we're almost at that inflection point where the next few leaps we're going to take are going to be sudden, and we're just going to be like, oh wow, this is super super impressive, and
Yeah.
hopefully going where the puck is going.
Yeah. It's going to be, I mean, that's where me coming from more of like the AI space, that's where I get really excited about is because of those, exactly to your point. It's like, it's not just small leaps. Like any new technology that comes out, like what came out with DeepSeek, where it massively reduced the price of even being able to leverage AI.
Yeah.
Now that's consolidated and democratized for almost every single company to use AI in a very, very serious way. So these steps aren't just like little by little, to your point. These are like massive steps that democratize a lot of this access to AI.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part for me is the access to everyone over time.
Yeah.
As you kind of follow the trajectory of these things, super early, very expensive, right? But a lot of value. Wait 5 years, things get a lot cheaper. Everyone gets access to it. And then, I could potentially see even a D2C site like resembling
Hmm.
kind of a personalized view as good as, what Amazon does. And then them having AI agents to run kind of campaigns sophisticated as other marketers do. And I think that becomes a very cool part of the story where, again, like we said, a mom and pop could be operating as an enterprise and really kind of driving a lot of innovation. And then we kind of get all learn from it. So I think that's a cool part of how we all work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Uh, with the kind of last 5 minutes we have, any final takeaways that you'd want all of us to kind of to take in our minds and to kind of start applying?
I think, I mean, going on the topics of AI and AMC is just the key thing that I think is important for this space and anybody that's really advertising in retail media is to test and learn. I think there are key exponential technologies like AI, like AMC, that if you're not at least testing and learning, you're probably doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. And especially with AI and AMC and the results that we've seen in this space of people that are actively trying it, that's what I would just encourage folks to do is just at least test, try, learn, adapt, because we've seen some very compelling results for folks that are heavily leaned in. And this was from folks that were doing things the way that they were doing it before. And they always thought that that was the status quo, right? That's always they always thought that they were doing things the right way. But we're seeing folks that from a year over year perspective, they have these broad revenue targets that they need to hit, but they have the same amount of marketing spend or maybe a nominal amount of increase in marketing spend. So they're just like, I don't know how to get there. And they use AI and AMC and the year over year growth and the performance and what they're able to do more on the tactical and targeting side is has just been pretty eye opening for them. So that's what I would say. I always tell the folks is just at least test, at least try
Yeah,
to a certain extent.
stay curious. I think that's how you win.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what's next for you guys? I believe you all are going to be at Shop Talk and some of those things. So anything you want to kind of share there?
Yeah. So we're going to prosper, shop talk, accelerate, unboxed. And so we're doing those key events. And then we're actively doing kind of AMC master classes and those workshops throughout the years. So every single quarter. So we'll always be doing events. And I think overall, just from a company perspective, our focus is AI and AMC. So we always try to drive what's possible in terms of AI. We're always testing out the newest models. And so where I get really excited is that agentic AI, the AI agents, and the use cases of the model. So we'll have some pretty cool things actually coming out this year around that that I think is going to be pretty compelling for folks and pretty exciting for folks to see what's possible even right now with the technology that's out there.
Very, very cool. Yeah, no, I'm definitely keeping my eyes open for that one.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely going to be one of the most intriguing things that will happen throughout this year is how people leverage AI agents. And I think you got the right Venn diagram of AMC, AI on top of it, and
Yeah.
kind of seeing what magic comes out of it.
Yeah.
And then, where could people kind of find you? You're a brilliant mind. You've got always a lot of original ideas. So where could we all find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably the main channel that I'm always posting about. Either too little or too much, depending upon who you ask. So LinkedIn, and then obviously we'll be at conferences. So please, if you find me, say hello, and yeah, visit our website if you guys want to learn more. But yeah, those are the key channels.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate you kind of being thoughtful with your time and kind of spending some time with us. I think this was a lot of valuable content or a lot of valuable insights for everyone. So thank you. And we look forward to kind of continue this conversation. And for us, we're at Spreetail. So if you want to look for us, we're on LinkedIn and we're on YouTube. So LinkedIn slash Spreetail as well as YouTube. So appreciate the time, June. And look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.